Hello, my name is Mick Cornett, a one-time journalist, but more recently a four-term mayor of Oklahoma City and the author of The Next American City. My guest is G.T. Bynum, the current mayor of Tulsa. Mayor, how you doing?
I'm great. It's always good to be with you, Mayor.
Mayors over the last 4 to, in your case, 6 years have been through a lot. I was making a mental list of some of the challenges that you've had to face in your time in office. And it started with a horrific flood. One of the worst floods in the city of Tulsa's history was followed up by COVID, and then a period of racial strife, which a lot of cities encountered. But in your case, you already had a conversation going about a horrific event that took place 100 years ago, an attack on some Black-owned businesses. And then you went through a series of court cases that most people from the outside would say strengthened tribal concerns that sometimes impede on the city of Tulsa's ability to operate normally. And then you have the economic crisis that we're in currently, where we're seeing a lot of escalating prices and inflation. That's a long list. And I don't know that when you signed up on day one, you could have actually foreseen any of these things.
No, and in the middle of all that, we were also hit by a polar vortex, which we did not even know was a thing before it hit Tulsa. And then also we were the victims of the largest cyber attack on any city in American history. So it has definitely been a series of challenges, but I'm always one to look on the bright side. And, you know, we talk about Tulsans as resilient people. And when I would talk about that in my early days as mayor, I would always draw on historical anecdotes to talk about how resilient Tulsans were. But we've really, I think, proven over the last several years how resilient this community is, and that we live up to that standard of when hard times hit, we pull together to help one another through them. And that's very much in the DNA of our city. And I've been so proud to see the way Tulsans have risen to every challenge that you just mentioned and a number of others that have come up. And we're stronger today than we were 6 years ago. And we have developed just tremendous momentum as a city coming out of so many of those challenges. I certainly wouldn't have wished those on anyone, but I think we've really proven to this generation of Tulsans has proven to ourselves that we're worthy of carrying the mantle of those who came before us.
Looking back on dealing with the COVID crisis, how do you think your administration fared?
You mentioned a moment ago that the flood that hit us in 2019, I never thought I would look back on that as the good old days. But that was, I think it taught us so many things from a natural disaster response standpoint. And having been a mayor in Oklahoma, you know that natural disaster response is just one of the things you sign up for when you become a mayor in this part of the country, in Tornado Alley, the part of the world that's afflicted by tornadoes more per square mile than anywhere else in the world. And that taught us, dealing with that flood, taught us how to deal with things that are physically out of your control, but how do you lead a community in a way that allows the citizens to do the best they can with the things that are in their control. I would say probably two big things that I tried to focus on early in the pandemic that I've learned from that flood experience. One is to just collect as much information as I could. As a mayor, you're in a position to have access to a lot of information that your citizens don't have. And I really focused on that in the early going of the pandemic, relying heavily on my colleagues, mayors in other cities, especially in the coastal United States that have been hit earlier than we were hit here in Oklahoma with the pandemic by about 2 weeks. But then also being very open and candid with the citizens about the realities that we faced and what the worst case scenarios could look like so that they could prepare. I think anytime you face a crisis, there's kind of two schools of thought. One is to hold back information because you don't want people to panic. But I've found that if you're just straight with people about the realities of the situation you're in, and they feel like they can then take that information and prepare for themselves on how best to protect themselves and their families and their loved ones, they don't panic. They rise to the occasion. We definitely saw that here in Tulsa. So I think that we did a really good job on that front. I was so fortunate to have a series of colleagues around the state here in Oklahoma, certainly Mayor Holt in Oklahoma City, but neighboring mayors in a number of other cities that I talked with every day in the early going of that pandemic to discuss ideas and share thoughts about how best our communities could rise to the occasion. And there is no question in my mind that there's thousands of people in Oklahoma that are alive today because of the response of cities, one by one, creating this patchwork of protection across the state, which not only directly saved lives, but more importantly, it protected the integrity of our healthcare systems so that they did not collapse under the weight of a surge in the virus that I'm confident would have occurred if we had not put in the measures that we did.
With COVID came a lot of federal money that was distributed through different government levels. Looking back, how were you able to deal with that as the money came in and trying to figure out how to responsibly spend it?
You know, we think that this has probably been, it might be the greatest inflow of federal dollars into Tulsa in the history of the city that we've experienced here in the last 3 years. And so, you know, we've had a handful of key things that we've applied to all of these. Certainly in the early going of the pandemic, we wanted to put the money in position largely to support first responders and healthcare providers to make sure they had enough protective equipment and the tools and resources they needed to do to save lives here in our city. But we also wanted to shore up small businesses here in our community. And we actually created a pool to purchase personal protective equipment so that businesses could buy it from that pool here locally at cost at a greatly lower rate than they would have had to buy it if they were trying to find it in the early going of the pandemic when those things were so hard to find. So we did things like that early in the pandemic. And then moving forward from that with small business loans and other things that we did, we were also very focused on making sure that we were not creating ongoing liabilities for the city. So we did not create programs that we would have to find a way to pay for when that federal money ran out. We were very upfront with the citizens that we want to invest these in one-time things to address this, you know, once in a generation crisis that we're facing, but we don't want to create ongoing problems for our city moving forward. One of the things I'm really proud of that we as a community did is that we kept our budget balanced independent of federal funds all the way through the pandemic. And that meant myself and nearly all of our city employees that don't wear a uniform as a first responder, we took furlough days and 10% reductions in our salary to make sure that our police department and fire department could stay fully staffed at all times and out in the field working to save lives. And by doing that, we kept our budget balanced so that later, when you had the American Rescue Plan and other things come along that a lot of cities had to use to backfill and balance their budgets, our budget was already balanced. And we could use those funds for significant investments in economic development and other things that we believe will help create greater equality of opportunity here in our city across racial and ethnic lines in Tulsa.
You and the city of Tulsa have done a great deal to try and diversify your economy, and I see a lot of investment in technology and technology startups. Could you expand on that and why you think it's so important?
We take great inspiration from a number of cities, including Oklahoma City during your time as the mayor there, that have built on their legacy industries and really acknowledge the economic reality that the safest local economy is a diversified local economy. The great, you know, I came in as a brand new city councilor 6 months before the Great Recession hit. And so I have seen firsthand the impact that an economic downturn can have on your ability to provide core services like public safety. And so diversifying our economy locally isn't just important from the standpoint of what's good for people keeping their jobs, it's crucial for us to maintain safety even in our city. And so we focused on a couple key things. Tulsa has a very strong background from an academic standpoint in the cybersecurity space. The University of Tulsa, it's actually the top university in the United States for staffing federal agencies with cybersecurity experts. A lot of people don't realize that because that being in cybersecurity, it's not something you always advertise that you're doing that. But we're wanting to use that program to make sure that we don't have everyone leaving that program and going to work for the federal government. We want people building businesses here in Tulsa. We've also, and I really give a lot of credit to this, to the team at the George Kaiser Family Foundation. They keyed on early that remote work was something that could have great potential for cities before the pandemic hit. They created a program called Tulsa Remote. It was famous at the time because it would pay people $10,000 to move to Tulsa for a year and work. And I think unfortunately, it was characterized as like, we're so desperate, we're paying people to move to Tulsa. What has happened, though, we just had the 2,000th person go through that program. 90% of the people that have gone through that program have stayed in Tulsa. It also has a harder acceptance rate than most Ivy League universities because it's so competitive to get in. And what's fascinating about this is we're bringing people from all sorts of different industries and different companies into Tulsa who already have jobs, but they're bringing that revenue stream from their job, from their company into our community, improving the overall intellectual awareness of our workforce locally around their particular industries. And that's creating this web, if you will, of knowledge in our community around so many different industries and businesses that I think it's going to have an outsized economic impact for Tulsa in the long run, beyond just having those remote workers here on their own. And so I'd say those are probably two of the big things that we've really been focused on. I remember when we first started talking about remote work in Tulsa, it seemed like this really unusual thing. And then the pandemic hit and suddenly everybody in America is remote working. And now it's an accepted business practice, which has helped this program grow even more. And what we found is Tulsa's competitive on this because we have great quality of life, but low cost of living. We can provide great amenities in our metro region here, if you will. I would include Northwest Arkansas and Oklahoma City in that region. Somebody that's coming here has access to all the amenities that you get, not just in Tulsa, but in the world-class museums like Crystal Bridges in Northwest Arkansas and world-class athletic events like the Thunder in Oklahoma City. And they get all of that at a way lower cost of living than many of them have experienced, especially in the coastal United States, by living here in Tulsa, but bringing the salary that they were making in their previous place they lived and bringing it here to the central United States.
You have thousands of employees. You have to negotiate with those public safety unions. You have citizens who are strapped because of inflationary times. What do you tell people when people say, look, the dollar just doesn't go as far as it was?
That's created a really interesting, what I call a mirage here in our city, because our sales tax, which that's our predominant source of revenue as a city government, our sales tax has spiked in the last year. And so people see how the city of Tulsa is bringing in record levels of revenue. But the other side of that coin is that what we had been paying our city employees to, keep people safe, to keep our streets in good shape, to do all the things from a back office standpoint that allow us as a city government to work, all of that had been eaten into their paychecks by inflation. Inflation was driving this surge in sales tax for us, not some giant economic boom that we've experienced. And so we have had to increase wages as a city government at record levels. I mean, in the last year, we increased both police and fire pay by the largest levels in the history of the city. We also had a record level increase in non-sworn employee pay, all just trying to keep pace with inflation so that it's not eating into our employees' paychecks and so that we remain competitive as an employer. So I tell citizens, when you see that giant increase in revenue that we're receiving as a city, that does not mean that we're suddenly flush with cash, because we have the same people working here today that we had a year ago. We're just having to increase their pay to keep up with inflation, to keep them on our team providing the service that they do. And so that is a big challenge for us from an operating standpoint. And we're seeing it really creep in on the capital improvement standpoint. We pass capital improvements programs as a city to get people to vote for a street project that when we're estimating it, when we put the program before voters, we think it's going to cost $10 million. And then this inflationary period hits, supply chain is tight, and suddenly we're seeing things go up by 10, 20, 30%. And we have to find ways to still get those projects done while having all of a sudden much more expensive projects due to inflation than we anticipated when we asked the voters for the funding to do them. So it's a real challenge.
Political discourse has a huge chasm, a lot of negativity when it comes to politics. How do you and other city leaders focus on your day-to-day job? You're about delivering quality streets and providing public safety, things that don't traditionally have to get caught up in the R&D politics of the country.
I think the greatest threat to our country right now is the division along partisan lines. I think we can do more damage to ourselves as a country than any foreign power can do to us through that division that we see happening. And I see a real opportunity for us at a city level to show people what the alternative can look like. I ran as a nonpartisan mayor in 2016, and when I was elected by a nonpartisan, or really bipartisan coalition of people, we've built a nonpartisan team in my office. I tell people that we want to run the city not like a political job, but really like you would think of as a large nonprofit enterprise. You don't expect the head of your local United Way to be fiercely partisan in the work that they do. You expect them to be focused on delivering great service to the people that need it. And that's our job as a city government. And so I've, as a mayor, tried to lead in that way from a nonpartisan standpoint. I'm really thankful. The team that we've built, I didn't even know this until we looked it up a couple weeks ago because a newspaper asked. Our team in my office, we have, I believe it's 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 3 independents who are on our team in the mayor's office in Tulsa. So it is completely nonpartisan. And I've worked with our city council along those same lines. And our goal is to show people that government can still work. We are still capable as Americans of finding common ground to face the greatest challenges that we have. And trust me, we have, you mentioned a number of them earlier, but when we look at combating inflation, when we look at the issue of homelessness, when we look at the issue of crime, one political party does not have the market cornered on good ideas or hard work or a desire to improve those things. And so we're trying to be very candid with the citizens of Tulsa about what the challenges in our city are, and then bring people from all different political beliefs and parties together in a way that we can find common ground on those solutions and pursue those together. We've had great success doing this from an economic development standpoint and from a public services standpoint, but there are other challenges that we're now applying it to that are big challenges, not just for cities, but for our country, I think. And I think we at a local level can demonstrate a better way of governing than they're seeing at the federal level right now.
Your city has spent a great deal of time in the last year or two in remembering a racial event that took place 100 years ago called the Tulsa Massacre. To your credit, you almost insisted that your city embrace the topic and discuss what happened and where the citizens are today. Can you kind of take us through your thought process in that part of it?
Sure. I will always remember the moment I decided to run for mayor. There was an article on a Sunday morning in the Tulsa World, and it was about how children growing up in the predominantly African American part of Tulsa are expected to live 11 years less than kids growing up elsewhere in our city. And when I read that, I'd been on the city council at that point for 7 years, but I was also a young father with 2 kids at that time, under 10 years of age. And it resonated with me as a parent. I thought about my friends who are raising their kids in that part of our city and love their children as much as I love mine. And they deserve a city that was willing to be open about that disparity and rally together and try to address it. And so I ran for mayor, not necessarily even expecting to win because my predecessor was very popular, but I wanted to use the campaign as a tool to raise awareness around that statistic. And as you know, and anybody that's run for office knows, campaigns can be very dehumanizing. But the most redeeming part of that campaign was that it didn't matter what part of town I was talking to. It didn't matter the political persuasion of the audience I was speaking to. Every group that I shared that statistic with was horrified by it and then wanted to know what they could do to help solve it. And so we've been focused on that for the last 6 years as a city, on making Tulsa a city where every kid that's growing up in our community has an equal opportunity for success. Well, one of the big things that I noticed when we came in along racial disparities here in Tulsa is that we had graves from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre that we know are mass graves here in our city that have never been pursued before. And at that point, we were nearing 100 years where the city had not done an investigation to find the mass graves of 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre victims. And so I launched that. That search is literally underway right now. There's teams from across the United States doing an excavation in what was at the time the largest city-owned cemetery, where we believe at least 18 of the race massacre victims are buried. And we're working to identify them, collect DNA that we could use to connect them with their descendants so that their descendants know what happened to their ancestors on the worst night in the history of our city and can give them a proper burial and have that closure. There's so much more that we're doing in this space, but when I came in, I wanted us to be a city. I always think about what kind of city do I want to leave my kids? I want us to be a city that when we know there are mass graves, we try to find them. I want this to be a city that every kid that's growing up here has confidence that we want them to have a great life and we want them to have great opportunity regardless of the neighborhood that they're growing up in. And so we have a plan, we have the team, and we have independent analysis on an annual basis to audit how we're doing to make Tulsa a city of greater equality. And I think it is a great testament to the desire of Tulsans to do the right thing in the 21st century, 100 years removed from a horrible night when so many lives of our neighbors were lost.
Great cities have great parks. Tulsa has the Gathering Place, which just opened about 3 years ago, maybe the grandest, largest, best urban park in the world. Take us through the thinking through that project, the city's involvement, and why the city of Tulsa decided to make such a commitment to parks.
Well, you're right. The Gathering Place is the largest park gift to any city in American history, at over $450 million. About half of that, the cost to build it, and then the other half, an endowment so that it is permanently operated and maintained at a world-class level. I again want to give credit on this to the team at the George Kaiser Family Foundation who led the local fundraising drive to pay for this. But I think it's so important that people understand the Gathering Place for our city is not a trophy park. I don't think we could have raised the money to build it if that was the goal. The idea behind it is that so many of the things that we as Americans have relied on historically to build community are on the wane. You know, church attendance is down. Civic association attendance is down. It's never been easy to get your news from people who tell you what you want to hear. You can shop online and never go to the grocery store. All these things that previously would cause people to encounter folks who had different beliefs than them, but be reminded that we're all human. Even if I disagree with them on that, I know that they're still a good person. So many of those things are on the wane. And so in the 21st century, we can either just say, well, I guess that's the way it's going to be. Everyone's going to be more isolated and divided. Or we can find new ways of building community. And for us, the Gathering Place is one of those big ways, by creating this amazing experience that draws people from throughout our metro into this one place where they can just have a great experience as Tulsans, not as Republicans and Democrats or white folks or black folks or born in this country or born abroad, but they can just have an amazing experience together. And that has been the case for the last 3 years since it opened. And we are constantly pursuing other ways of developing placemaking and those other kinds of experiences that draw people together and remind us of our shared humanity as Oklahomans, as Tulsans, as Americans, and as people.
G.T. Bynum is the mayor of Tulsa. Mayor, thank you for your time and thanks for your commitment to public service.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you.